Hottie, this is the final episode of the season, and I'm going to hog it. I'll just be right up front. It's my chance to tell my story from race day. But, I think my biggest story is one that is easy to ignore. The fact that more or less everything went great, from my laser helmet to my pro saddle to my Shimano drivetrain and cranks and chain and bottom bracket and brakes to my Shimano shoes and my pedals. I didn't have any problems. No problems whatsoever on race day.
Yep, I asked you twice on race day, both during your pit stops. How's the bike? How's the bike? And both times you said perfect, which is a
100%
ringing endorsement for our great sponsor, Shimano. We are both big fans of Shimano. Both are proud to ride with Shimano. Love the all bodies on bikes message that Shimano puts out there. And for this season, for sponsoring this show.
Yep. Check out the company that we both trust enough to put right at the top of every episode at bike.shimano.com.
3, 2,
1. Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race, presented by Shimano. Find them at bike.shimano.com. This is season 5. Actually, it's been season 5, maybe we should say. Episode 26 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, freaks you out for the highest, hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I'm Michael Houghton, Hottie to most.
And I am Fatty, and I don't think anyone's freaked out anymore. All the freaking out is over, because this is it. It is the final episode of the season. Hottie, pour a drink, get comfortable. I am going to monopolize the mic a little bit to tell my story.
Yeah, that's quite all right, because I think episode 25 featured a lot of my voice with all the interviews and all the other stuff. So have at it. You're free to run on this thing. But before you do that, let's do a little follow-up on a couple of topics. First, in episode 25, like I just mentioned, we talked a little bit about a crash on the pavement outbound between Powerline and the fish hatchery. Well, we've talked to Sheriff Heath Speckman, and they are still investigating that accident. If you saw this crash, though, or know anything about it, please call Leadville's non-emergency dispatch number at 719-486-1249.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and repeat that number, 719-486-1249. Sheriff Speckman, a huge friend of the show, and gave us a great lead out in the group ride, and is paying careful attention. He cares about this, things like this, because of course he has done this race a few times himself, as well as the lead man, for crying out loud. So Coach Cody Waite has been our most frequent guest this season. Big thanks to Cody and to the feed for that. We wanted to catch up with him post-race to find out how his own day went. Cody, good to have you here for the last episode of the season. We've had you on throughout the season, but your day didn't go quite as you would have liked. Tell us the story.
It did not, and that's for sure. Long story short, a couple of weeks ago, prior to race day, I caught my turn of COVID. I managed to avoid it for 2.5 years or whatever it's been around now, and my turn finally came. And to be honest, the illness wasn't so bad, but it did interrupt training to where the last 2.5 weeks coming into Leadville, I've got very little training and energy levels were pretty low on race day. So it was a tough call to even start, but you're here, in Leadville, and it's so exciting, and it's not an event you want to miss by any means. So I figured I'd give it a go and see what happened. And ultimately it just didn't work out.
So how far along did you make the decision to pull the plug?
I finally pulled the plug at the fish hatchery inbound. So whatever that is.
Oh.
But the decision, I was chewing over it.
That's 80 miles into the race.
It was most of the way, I suppose, into the race. But, going into the hardest part, I would argue. But It was kind of going into Twin Lakes on the way out. I was recognizing that I just did not have the energy to do this, but I still wanted to keep going. You always have that glimmer of hope of maybe things will rebound. And, the legs will come around and, I'll drink and eat and all that kind of good stuff and, get up the climb up Columbine and get back down and, magically feel better. But that wasn't the case. And then I don't know, I guess it's just not in me to throw in the towel so easily. So coming back through Twin Lakes inbound, my wife, Kathy, who was doing my feeds for me, was kind of thinking like ready for me to call it quits there. And she was surprised when I, yelled out the bottles that I wanted her to hand me up and everything. And to be honest, it hadn't even really crossed my mind yet to not finish the race. But it was shortly thereafter I started thinking about like, okay, what am I actually accomplishing here? What are the risks involved? Because you do hear those horror stories of, complications from COVID if you try to do too much too soon and that sort of thing. So ultimately I tried to make the smarter call, even though it wasn't what I wanted to do.
Now, it is hard to make the wise choice in the heat of a race, right? I think that the fact that all of us have seen people who are bruised and bloody get back on their bikes and just keep pedaling again when they could be hurting themselves worse. Now, you are a coach, and so what do you tell your racers about when they should and when they should not pull the plug?
Yeah, I mean that's always a tough question, but by without a doubt, if your health is at any kind of risk, I mean that's a clear indication of you need to stop. I mean that's definitely one thing, and I would honestly even go as far as just saying, if the reward of finishing, the accomplishment of finishing, which is something to be said for sure, doesn't surpass or, meet the potential delays or setbacks or risks, whatever term you want to use, that may occur in the, weeks that follow finishing the race. That's probably when it's time to start thinking about pulling the plug. So I did have another athlete, this year doing the race, and he mid-race experienced a extreme dehydration and just kind of overall gut issues. I mean, very similar to things that I think that a lot of the ultra runners feel in the 100 run, where his stomach just completely shut down. He eventually started peeing a very dark brownish yellow color, and he wisely recognized that like this is not safe. He's going into that kind of rhabdomyolysis territory of like, if he were to finish, he'd probably end up in the hospital on IV if not something more significant than that. So it does happen. It's one of the things. I mean, Leadville is a serious event. I mean, it really is a big challenge, and that's why it's such a great accomplishment. When any of us finish, regardless of time, regardless how fast we're going. And with those big endurance events, there is a risk associated with it that can pop up on event day. So, but yeah, I think you put your health first and foremost. And, beyond that, if it's just some cramping or, stomach aches or, more of the common ailments that we experience on race day, those are worth pushing through. But anything long term, I think it's smarter to pull the plug.
And if you have other races coming up as well, like you can push yourself beyond belief and get your finisher's medal or buckle or what have you. But if you're a serious racer with a busy calendar, I mean, those folks, right, they have to make those choices. Sophia Villafañe, who was leading the Lifetime Grand Prix, pulled out because she was not in a good way. She was having a terrible day, and she's got a big calendar in front of her. And so, man, sometimes you got to make a hard choice out there on course and go, man, this is just not, it's not going to pay off now. It's not going to pay off for the rest of the season.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah. Now, you are now in the situation a lot of racers are for the Leadville 100, where you probably have a sense of unfinished business.
For sure.
Let me assure you, as someone who has now finished it 24 times, that this is not a feeling that ever goes away.
Mm-hmm.
So starting to think about that 2023 buckle. How soon is too soon? And maybe how soon is not too soon to start your, I guess, your rebuild? And so, yeah, how soon is too soon and how soon is not too soon to start the rebuild for and the planning for 2023?
Yeah. So I think there is no too soon, in my opinion, in terms of the planning, the thought process, the excitement, right? I mean, just scrolling through, your Slack workspace, my Slack workspace with our group of athletes we train, the Facebook page, the Leadville, participant Facebook page. I mean, everyone was like buzzing after the race, right? Because it is such a fun build up, and whether your race went, better than you hoped, or in my case, not the way I hoped, the excitement is still there. So I think thinking about it, there is no too soon. I mean, for many people, it's as soon as they cross the finish line, right? And some people, it's, maybe the next morning because, maybe they finished and you're completely exhausted and you're like, okay, one and done. But I can't tell you how many people I've met that say, after the race, in the hours after the race, like, that was great. I'm good. I can check that off my bucket list. And then it's not more than a day or two later that they're like, okay, I know I can slice 5 minutes here and 10 minutes here and get a better time. So thinking about it, there is no too soon. Now, from the physical standpoint of actually training for it, I think you do need to be patient with that process. I think most people do really, really well with about 10, as many as 10 and maybe as few as 8 months of focused preparation for a big event like Leadville. So you need those like 2 to potentially 4 months where you aren't riding or training specifically with Leadville in mind. And whether you do another event that's on the calendar, whether it be a mountain bike race or something completely different, or you just go ride for fun with your friends, your family, whatever the case may be. You just need that kind of break after the event to reset, recharge, because even though you may be super motivated the morning after, your body definitely needs time to repair itself, for one thing. And that can take, a week to 3 weeks, depending on how, deep you dug, so to speak. And then you also, you do need longer to recharge the mind, even though you're like excited the day after. It's a big commitment training for a big event like this. So making sure you recharge the mental batteries as well. So when you're 8 to 10 months away, you're ready to kind of commit and get back into that focused training phase.
I can recall the times I finished Leadville, Cody. Man, it would take me easily a week to feel even normal.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was still a struggle to go out and ride. My rides were maybe 45 minutes to an hour, and they were, pretty groggy-like, pretty slow.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How do we know? What will be the indications from our body that, okay, you're good to go again?
Yeah. That could be a little tricky because sometimes our mind or our will is stronger than our muscles, so to speak, or maybe the other way around. If you're, one of the more techie type people and you're looking at like HRV data and your resting heart rate, those things can give you some indications of when you're ready to kind of ride or train again. But again, I think there's that mental piece, and you want to make sure you have that desire to get out and ride again. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with taking 1 or 2 or even 3 weeks, like completely away from the bike, or even longer if desired. Everyone's different. But I would agree with you, Hadi, that it takes a good week for most people to kind of feel, like you said, normal again, meaning, the stiffness in the legs is gone. Maybe your backache is, finally disappeared, or, whatever the case may be. And also restocking things like the glycogen stores. If you were out there for, 8, 9, 10, 12, however many hours, you basically emptied, or you should have at least emptied your glycogen stores. And that can take quite a long time to replenish as well. So my prescription for it, even if I had another race on the calendar, which I personally do not this year, I would take a full week completely off the bike, maybe do something like some light walking, hiking, something like that, perhaps just to keep the legs stretched out, and then get back on the bike maybe this coming weekend if I were going to try to race again in a few weeks, let's say.
So then, tell me then, who is this thing we hear about? Something called a Keegan Swenson?
Yeah.
This person, I don't know if it's actually an individual or a real person or somebody that landed on the planet, but I hear there's this special
a robot
being out there who can win Leadville and then turn around the next day and win another big race. Can I do that?
That's the easiest question yet.
No. The answer is no, Cody.
Exactly.
You can't.
Only one person can do that.
Totally crazy. I can't even wrap my head around it. Hats off to him and his crew. That's an amazing endeavor. And, when we talk about recovering and when are you ready, in theory, we could all get on our bike the next day and we could ride. And most of us probably could go the distance of, say, doing a steamboat or a second Leadville the next day. But how much would your power, your speed drop off from day one to day two? The more trained you are, the less it's going to drop off. And obviously Keegan is someone who's exquisitely trained and then also has, phenomenal genes on top of that. So, but all of those leadboat racers that did both steamboat and Leadville, are amazing athletes to be said. That would be 1 year, 2 years or 3 years ago, I was in the Leadville. It was COVID year. I was supposed to do Leadboat, and then everything got canceled, of course. And I had the option to defer, and I chose not to because after a year of thinking about doing Steamboat, after Leadville, I came to my senses, and I was like, no, I think I'm good. I'll just do Leadville.
During that year, you gained wisdom.
Right.
So one thing that always happens to me, and I'm sure this happens to you and probably to some of your racers, is a post-Leadville letdown.
Mm-hmm, big time.
You just mentioned a moment ago that after the race, you're kind of buzzing and there's a lot of positive energy and the endorphins that come with having done something or tried something big and huge that you've been thinking about all year. And then suddenly the day after you are, suddenly without this thing
right.
that has been occupying your thoughts and your efforts for most of a year.
Right.
I'm interested in, what do you tell your athletes about, the day after a big race? And how do you react to, a couple days after the race where there is a tendency to feel a little bit adrift?
Oh, that's completely normal. So yeah, anyone listening to the show, that's experiencing that right now, without a doubt, like you are amongst the other, 1,500 or so racers that raced, this last weekend. So, and that's totally normal. And it's just part of the process. We talk about peaking a lot when we're training and that peak fitness that we're all striving for race day. Well, with peaks comes valleys, and that valley comes fairly quickly, whether it be from a mental standpoint, it's, like you said, a day or two later where you just feel sort of empty, without maybe not a goal that's not for a while out, or maybe, if it's as long as next year, that's a long ways out. And you feel a little like an empty nester, like your kid's gone off to college now. And, it's a different feeling. So, and yeah, like I said, that's totally normal. And, I think one of the best things to do though, in the days after is while everything's fresh in your mind, make sure you sit down and do a little journaling, so to speak. Write down everything that went really well for you, on the week leading into race day, on race day, cover as many details as you can too, while it's fresh in your mind. Everything from like, what tires did you run? What tire pressure did you run? Definitely write down everything you ate and drank. Did that work well for you? All those sorts of things. Who, your crew, did they make it to where they needed to be when they needed to be? Did they have everything you needed? Is there something that you wish they had for you that they didn't? All those sorts of things, because inevitably most of us are going to do this race again because we love it and it's very addicting. And, having that sheet of paper or a little notebook to look back on next year as you begin the preparation process, you're going to be that much further ahead and, knowing how to get prepared, and improve upon what you experienced this year too. So that's something you can do in the immediate future. And then after that, just kind of letting go and enjoy the stories from everyone that that did it, or I really enjoy that, hearing from all my athletes, hearing all their stories, just like the same process, what went well, what didn't go well, all those sorts of things, and gets you excited for next year.
That's great advice, because it is amazing how all of these things that seem currently completely burned permanently into your brain, how they fade away very quickly. And by writing some of that down, you avoid having to relearn it again in 2023. Good advice, Cody. As always, great talking with you. Thanks so much for the valuable advice you gave me and Lisa and all of our listeners over this season.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity. It's been great getting to know both of you guys really well, and I really enjoyed it.
And a huge thanks to Cody for all his insights this season. Invaluable stuff we got from him, we learned from him, and you can find him as you work towards your 2023 plans, whether that be Leadville or some other big event. Just go to Weight Endurance, that's WAITEENDURANCE. Remember, there's 2 E's in there, .com.
Hadi, the whole reason that I originally got into blogging and now into podcasting is storytelling, and it is my turn. So I hope you're comfortable. I hope you've used the restroom recently, because this is going to take a while.
Okay. This is like being a DJ and putting on Do You Feel Like We Do by Peter Frampton, right? 15 minutes long. I can just do whatever I want while you talk. So I'm down for that.
Oh, is that really how it worked?
That's how it works. In fact, recently, we're getting off on a tangent here, folks. So recently, I think for National Radio Days, the DJs voted on their favorite long song so they could take a bathroom break. And Peter Frampton's Do You Feel Like We Do was the #1 song for just that purpose. So go ahead, Peter, Eldon, Fatty. Do you feel like we do?
I will never listen to that song the same way again. All right. I'm going to actually back up way before the day of the race, because I want to talk about the stage race and the fact that I was fretting about gearing. I used the 34x20 gearing in the stage race. That means 34 tooth chain ring in the front, 20-tooth cog in the back. And I felt a little spun out, as I talked about in an episode. Did a little poll on Facebook, not because I was going to use that to influence my thinking, but just because I was curious what everyone thought. But I made the decision I was going to go to a 34x19 cog, or gearing. Racer of Racer Cycle Service, my mechanic locally, and Cycles of Life both took care of me. And there was a little strange story of I went from having no 19-tooth cog with me to having 4 of them by race day. I called Racer and said, I need a 19-tooth cog. And he's like, well, I have the one that you had been using right here. I will send it to you by next day air. And so he sent that, and I thought I was all set. And then it got returned because apparently I don't have a valid address in Leadville. And so I went to Cycles of Life, and I was like, I have 2 sets of wheels. Can you get me 2 19-tooth cogs? And he said, you betcha. By the way, I have a used 19-tooth cog that I'm going to put on in the meantime. And then Racers came in. Anyway, I had way more 19-tooth cogs than I needed, an embarrassment of them. But I will say, with my plethora of 19-tooth cogs and my wheel sets all ready to go, I entered the race or the readiness for this race, I would say, and I hope you noticed this as well, Hadi. I was a little more mellow and maybe a little more comfortable than usual. I actually spent some time having fun before race day.
We were super busy, I think, leading into the race with the ride, and then the podcast we did at the expo. And I think that served as a little bit of I was a little worried about how much energy you were putting out too. I'm like, I hope he's not, overdoing it. I think you went zip lining and whitewater rafting and some other nuttiness too during the week. So, but you did seem relaxed, and I think maybe some of that was due to the fact you'd been up in Leadville for more than just a week. So that kind of plays into it too, right? And plus, you've been there for years. By the way, I just ran a gear inches calculator on the difference between a 19 and a 20 for you was 3 inches. So that would be, I think, 3 inches per revolution of the cranks is what you got out of by going to the 19 from that 20. So congrats on 3 inches.
It's well, thank you. It spread over the course of 105 miles, it makes a difference. It really does. And I mean, the easy way to think about it is a 19 tooth cog is 5%. It is 5% more revolutions per crank than a 20 tooth cog, right? It's 5% more. So that means I was going 5% harder, but it means that I would be spun out 5% later. And really, that was what I was after. So yeah, like you said, I went to Breckenridge. I rode in the trails off near the college. I went whitewater rafting. I went zip lining. I had a lot of fun before the race. And usually I try, to obey what my coach says, but I needed a vacation just from my personal life. So I did that. And on one of those rides, actually, I had an incredibly insightful conversation with a good friend. I think this is going to be something I remember forever. I was talking with Chris Donovan, who has been a good friend ever since my blogging days. And we started talking about how he and I think a lot of racers are really good at converting success into failure. That after my first Leadville 100, which I will always remember as I did it in 10 hours and 37 minutes, that instead of thinking, wow, I really did great, I started thinking about all the things that I did wrong. And I think for many, many years, I have done that. I take all of the work and all of my passion, all of my effort, and I use a single number, my finishing time, to basically as a metric of success or failure. And he and I were talking about what is wrong with us that we work so hard and then use a number as a metric of success. And I resolved that this year would be different. I would not focus just on my finishing time and fail to appreciate the day, the fact that I was with people that love doing what I do on a course that I love riding in, this thing that I've been doing. I was starting for my 25th time, for crying out loud. And then one last thing, and this was actually a lot of fun. By staying engaged, I actually was a lot less stressed out before the race. Melissa, my stepdaughter, who is sponsored by the feed among many others, she needed to make an Instagram reel the evening before the race, and she asked me to help on that. And we were workshopping it, figuring out what would be a fun, basically promotional ad type thing. And we bounced a lot of ideas off each other, and then I filmed it with her, and then she was on her own for the editing. It turned out really fun. And instead of being freaked out the evening before the race, I was distracted, diverted, having fun, engaged in doing something. So it was really nice. So thank you to Melissa for helping me not spin out like I normally do the evening before that race. So I promise now I'm going to get to the race itself. I'm sure you noticed, because you were there well before I was. The morning was pretty warm. I'm not exactly sure what the temperature was, but I was very happy to get rid of the jacket I had been wearing and give that to you before the race began. And I was fine in a short sleeve jersey and arm warmers, which I think I took off an hour into the race. It was awesome seeing you. You were right there with me when they did the Star Spangled Banner and shot the shotgun. It was so great. Just hanging out with a friend there for a second. It was awesome that you had a media tag so that you were allowed to stand there with me. That was fantastic. And it did make me think, and tell me this. if you are not in the one of the 3 white corrals, is it important anymore to get to the starting line more than 15 minutes before the race? I don't think it is.
Not unless you are worried you might have like a little bathroom duty.
Sure.
Right, while you're standing around there, then maybe you want to allow for a little extra time. But, because I think just standing in those corrals, even for the pros, it just creates more tension, right? You did a great job of releasing all this tension, going to the start line in a calm state of mind. And you can throw all that away by, showing up in the corral too early and standing around and starting to fester. So, no, I think except for white, and as we interviewed, we showed you in our last episode, those folks they need to get there early. Otherwise, show up at 6, 10, something like that.
Something like that. And that is about when I got there. And it's not like I had to move bikes around and beg for a space. There was plenty of space left in the corral. And as a single speeder, I didn't care very much about whether I had a frontmost spot in that corral. There was the Star Spangled Banner, the shotgun goes, and then I move forward and then wait another couple of minutes and then move forward and wait a couple of minutes, and then I was off. And right away noticed there was an injured rider, and this is within a couple hundred yards of the beginning of the race. An injured rider on the left side of the road. From what I understand, he got seriously hurt. I have no idea what happened to him. Hope that he is recovering well. And then the most surreal thing that has ever happened to me in this race happened, Hadi. I got literally passed by every single person in the green corral. And so that by the time I got, because I'm on a single speed, and so, everyone's just zooming right by me. By the time I got to the dirt, for the couple miles before St. Kevin's, I was all alone. And then for half a mile, they are dropping, they actually vanish out of sight. And I am 10, 15 minutes, whatever, into this race that usually I am used to being shoulder to shoulder, wheel to wheel, and I am riding it all by myself. There is nobody around. I am riding, and I literally had a moment where I was wondering, did I take a wrong turn? Am I
dreaming?
Am I somehow in a parallel universe? Because I'm racing the Leadville 100, starting from a pretty fast corral, and I'm by myself, and it was so weird.
And then the Leadville god just say, "No, fatty, you're just in between wave starts. Proceed."
It was like that because just a couple minutes before I got to that left-hander where you were suddenly going uphill again, the fast, the bleeding edge of the purple corral catches me, zooms past me, and they hit St. Kevin's, and then right behind them, I hit St. Kevin's, and that put me in a very common experience, which is I have been, the people who get to the bottom of St. Kevin's are not the people who are necessarily going to be the fastest at climbing St. Kevin's. They're the people who are very fast on, getting into a tuck and riding in a pace line, and they are not necessarily the fastest climbers. And so I went from being all by myself to needing to kind of, thread the needle between a number of racers. And I will say, I never did have to get off my bike no one ever got in my way to the extent that I had to put a foot down. And I had a better Kevin's than I did on the stage race, which is to say this 34x19, I thought it might make me need to walk that final 0.2 of a mile or whatever it is before the hard left turn. It gets so steep there, but I didn't. I was in I was feeling good. That 19 tooth is very comfortable and natural to me. I've ridden for many years. And so I just, I did great, made that left turn. And then following our own advice that we've had in this podcast, I had my first feed, my first gel. And I had set my GPS actually to chime every 20 minutes but this was sort of right in the middle of that 20 because it had been about half an hour. And so I was like, well, I'm going to have a gel anyway because I knew that it was a good opportunity for it. And then I kept forgetting, like, okay, am I eating between the chimes or am I eating on the chimes? I don't think I ever let 20 minutes of a full 20 minutes go by. And I don't know exactly how many gels I have. But if you figure every 20 minutes times 9 hours, that's 3 times 9. I might have had 27 gels last Saturday.
Oh, that hurts. Well, I do know when you finally got to us that every gel was gone. I think we counted them all the packets open and gone. So you were staying, whether or not the alarm clock was keeping you on time or you were eating in between there, you were eating everything.
Yeah, I was. And I never went more than 20 minutes. So I was getting 300 calories-ish every single hour. And as you know, I practice what I preach. I am a pretty disciplined writer. That is the way that I have been writing in my training. And I knew that I could handle 300 calories worth of gel every hour for an indeterminate and almost infinite amount of time. And I know some people go, ew, that sounds terrible, but I can do it. And I think that most people, if they train themselves, can do that. And that's, I mean, you and I have been talking about fundamentals recently. That is a fundamental of endurance racing, is getting so that you can do, so that you know that you can eat the kind of food and the amount of food for the duration of the race, and that it's not going to be a question, right? And I knew that I could, and I never felt hungry the whole day. As you noticed when I emptied my pockets at the first time I saw you, that I had stuffed in the side panels of my DNA cycling, the adventure cycling bibs that I've been wearing. Just really like those. I don't even know how many I had in there by the time I saw you. What, 18? No. It would have been about 9 by the time I saw you the first time, but a lot. And it's easy to get them in there. It was easy to get them out. And I think it's worth mentioning one more time, DNA Cycling has been a fantastic sponsor for us this year. And not just because they have been good to us, but they've been good for us. You and I both love in particular, their gravel cycling bibs. They are perfect for this race. This is not a gravel race. It's a mountain biking race, but these bibs are just perfect for it. So make sure, go to dnacycling.com, and thank you for sponsoring this season. Okay, on to Hagerman. I'm not going to talk about the descent on pavement. Not very exciting when you are riding on a single speed and you don't even try pedaling because you're spun out. But when you get to Hagerman, the plight of the single speeder really does become obvious. People are catching, you are catching are slower than you on the climbs, but they are faster than you on downhills and flats. So it's hard to work with anyone when you were racing racing single speed. And I started thinking about the fact that I'm not going to really be working with anyone this day. I was going to time trial the Leadville 100, more or less, kind of like what Rose had talked about. Now, of course, Rose isn't really time trialing. She is working with someone at any given moment. There's fast people with gears that she can work with. She's talking about racing her own pace, but I really was riding by myself for most of the day without working with someone. So on to Sugarloaf. You and I've talked about this, I don't know how many times, but I love Sugarloaf. The climb in the morning, as somehow it seems like the temperature always has warmed up just a little bit. My body has gotten to the point where I feel good. And on a single speed, Sugarloaf is a fantastic single speeder's climb. I know that for the folks who were finishing later in the day, Sugarloaf was, slick and nasty, and there were a lot of people who were falling and flatting. But at this time in the morning, it was beautiful. There was a great line that was in place, and I just felt like I was having, not just a fast day, but a good and fun day. So it was fantastic. Power line. I was comfortable on this descent. And I want to give high credit to my wheels on this, actually, because confidence is a huge part of descending. And you would think that with having the very light G23 wheels that I have on my single speed, that I might be nervous. But you know what? Those things have been so bomb-proof that it's 2 Leadvilles in a row that I've ridden these wheels, and as well as Crusher and the Tusher, and just my mountain bike training. I treat those gravel wheels like mountain bike wheels, and they've been bomb-proof. Knowing that your wheels, no matter which NV wheels, are strong and built to the highest possible standards, it means anything else. I mean, it means more than practically anything else.
Yeah, NV built those wheels, in particular, those G23s, to be a little more compliant than, your standard stiff race carbon wheel. They wanted them to give just a little so folks weren't being bounced off the trail. And I think that's why on Sugarloaf, you feel so good.
Yeah, I think that is it. They for sure don't feel flexy, but they are not. They just feel right, and you feel good. They feel fast. I think that Cole should maybe look into getting himself some NV wheels. He might have had a little bit better of a day as he came down Powerline. Who knows? But once I got to the pavement off of Powerline, I had so many offers of Hell Potty, so many offers of people saying, hey, jump on our train. Thanks for the podcast. It was so generous, and I could not take a single person up on their offer. It's, people are just flying with their geared bikes. And I think that for the first time during the day, I was thinking, why am I riding a single speed? I don't know if I'm going to be able to get under 9 hours, but if I do, it's going to be just barely on a geared bike. Oh, I could be 10 minutes ahead of where I am right now. So, but I was having fun on the bike. And so I was that compensated for it. And I've been wanting to see, as a 56-year-old guy, if I had it in me to do Leadville on a single speed. That was more important to me than knowing. I wouldn't say I knew for sure I could do a sub 9 again on my on a geared bike, but I did last year, and I feel like I'm a little more fit this year than I was last year. I think I would have been fine, but instead I was just watching people go by.
Yeah, kind of a helpless situation, isn't it? I mean, unless you were a supreme spinner to jump in those pace lines, right, on a single speed, I would think that all the single speeders share the same kind of experience there.
Yeah, it's a lonely existence out there on the road on your single speed, but it's fun too. I mean, and people people acknowledge you and they respect the insanity that has brought you to this point in time. So I want to say thank you again to the folks who's had so many nice words about the podcast. I think it was on these flatter sections when we all were able to breathe that I heard most of those. Getting through Pipeline and onto Twin Lakes Dam. The 34x19 was noticeably better than the 3420 that I had done, just a couple weeks before in the stage race, but I was still alone a lot. If I ever do single speed again, I would definitely want to spend some time training for cadence, training for a faster spin. But I don't think I'm ever going to race a single speed again in Leadville. I don't know. Maybe I will. Who knows?
Well, to be clear, that is a trainable skill to do.
Yeah.
The problem with it is it does take a fair amount of time to do. For some reason, I don't know why. I think I was injured at one point as a road racer. And all I could really do for workouts was do spin drills. And when I came back from injury, man, I had a nice cadence, like very smooth, rounded stroke. And so it is trainable. Just takes some time to do.
I mean, the people who won the single speed category, they were doing, I think the winner did the race in under 8 hours. So that requires both power and a fast cadence. So it is possible. It is doable. It is trainable, but I didn't do it. I had great power, not a terrific spin. So you would think that I'm going to get to an embarrassing part here. I was working on my 24th finish. It was my 25th start. I've done the course for practice a number of times that I wouldn't even try to count, that I would never take a wrong turn. But you would be wrong. I took a wrong turn. I was in zombie mode, just following wheels. And I missed a clearly marked left fork, and a group of, I would guess, between 7 and 10 of us suddenly found ourselves looking down what almost looked like a cliff, a very steep drop off with a very rocky Jeep road. It was not Clavicle Hill, and I knew it was not part of the course, but you were racing so stupid, right? Your brain is not working right. And most of me knew that, well, the right thing to do is turn around. But I actually did consider dropping down and seeing if it rejoined the course. I had no idea if that would work.
It does. You want to know how I know? I wrote it myself on the Tuesday before the race. And I missed, it's 130C there on the left. And it's just in the trees, and it doesn't stand out very well. And I hadn't been out there since, I hadn't ridden that section since 2018 or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah,
it's been a while. So when I got out there, I'm like, well, I know if I just keep going this way, and it does loop around and get you back towards a single track, but that little drop off there is nasty. It's worse than Clavicle Hill, so you don't want to go that way, but it's easy to do. And especially, you had people with you, so other people steered off course as well? Okay.
Yeah, I was just following someone's wheel, and who was also following someone's wheel. So someone, half a dozen people up ahead of me missed a mark, and the rest of us, we were just, we were in race sheet mode, and we just followed along, and suddenly come to the stop, and there was a little bit of milling about before we turned around, and I was looking hard at when I got back and to see were there no course markings? And no, it is very well marked. And they were very clear about what the right direction was. We just all missed the turn. So,
oops.
Yeah. I mean, it happens. It's kind of funny. So, the single track went great. Had a lot of fun. It was nice, actually. I was in this group of people, and there was no question whether it would make any sense for me to pass people on the single track or for anyone to pass me. We were in enough of a train that it's like, well, suppose you pass two people. That moves you up 1/10 of a second. There was no point. So everyone just sort of got, we were in a Congo line, but a good fast-moving Congo line, got to the pavement, and away we go. And, took that. I had a good climb up to the descent down into Twin Lakes Dam. Always loved going through Twin Lakes Dam because it is such a party. I had the most frightening moment, actually, of the entire day as I rode across the dam. Someone's child bolted from the left side of the trail across to the right while looking back toward their parent or toward something, but not toward me. They did not see me. Only by grabbing two hands full of brake and throwing my butt off the back of the bike so that I didn't endo. Did I miss that kid? But I did miss that kid. And there was a mortified parent yelling at a child to come on back. Everything was okay, and I was relieved. And got to you, and that was my first stop and first exchange of the day. How would you say that went?
Excellent. I don't know if you can score any higher than excellent. We did record the stop for timing purposes. I mean, we're going to play that recording for folks, but I mean, as folks know who listen to our show on crewing and crewing to win, I mean, Fatty's feed is totally laid out, totally scripted out. In fact, Fatty doesn't leave it up to my penmanship either. He typed out his feed, outbound, inbound, pipeline, outbound, inbound. He had all the prep stuff laid out. He had all his particulars about what he was wearing, typed out and bolded and bullet pointed and all that stuff, And so the feed went, like clockwork. So let's play that in real time so people get a feel for, how quickly a feed can go.
All right. There you go.
What's up? How you doing, man?
Touch out.
Yeah, and let's get rid of these arm warmers. It is that warm day. get your arm in through this one.
How's Melissa doing?
Great. She is, we had her 12 minutes back of the first place rider.
Awesome.
Right?
I don't want those. I'm feeding plenty well.
Oh,
Okay, give me a couple.
All right.
You want any fresh pickles?
No, I'm good.
Good. Okay.
Throw on the ground what you don't want, huh?
Your pickle juice is open, so you can just.
How's the bike, Fatty? Okay?
Bike's perfect. I'm all set.
Your glasses all right?
Reese's number 4.
Betty!
What time is it?
Well, I will just say nice work, Hottie. Nice work, Mrs. Hottie. And I think actually my good friend, was Chris with you at the first? No, it wasn't Chris who was with you at the first. It was Amber's husband was with you the first time at the first exchange. It was.
And David Houston was there too. Yeah.
David Houston was also there.
Yeah. We had a whole crowd there for you. I guess it went so fast you couldn't take inventory of who all was there. But yeah, we actually had 4 people there, but just Mrs. Hottie and I did we focused on you and tried to make sure that, we were the only 2 people you really had to deal with.
It is funny how little you observe when you are on that bike. You are so focused on one thing and one thing only that you just don't notice a whole lot else. All I noticed was I pulled in, you gave me exactly what I had asked for. You asked the questions that I had, which were, do you want to get rid of your do you want to get rid of your arm warmers? Yes, I wanted to get rid of my arm warmers. You had all the food I needed. I didn't have to worry about anything. It's great having a crew that you really trust. And I was out the door. It was fantastic. And then on to Columbine. The GOO parks their van right at the base of where the Columbine climb starts in earnest. And Yuri Hauswald, friend of the show, been on the podcast before, and has committed to racing this race next year. Right before I got there, I saw Keegan Swenson, who was, I have never, ever, and I was racing, I was doing very well in the race at this point. I was on the bubble of still having a sub-9 possibility. I think you'll agree. But Keegan had already been to the summit and back down from Columbine. That is the first time a pro has ever been that far down when I saw the first pro. He would eventually turn in a 6 hour and
1 second. Yeah.
1 second. It was like,
so he was essentially on a record setting time right in that area. And the only person who could have been anywhere near that in your experience would have been Christian Heineck and Albin Lascaux in 2015 or whatever year that was when they actually set the record. But yeah, that was because when he went up before you got there, he was with a group. And then he turns around and comes down and he's alone, and that's fine. Okay, he dropped. But he had like 4 or 5 minutes on second place already. So, yeah.
Well, he's not just an engine. He is a real technician on that bike. He is a true mountain biker. And you remember, I mean, we've talked with Jeremiah Bishop about that miracle year where they, the only year that there has been a sub-6 racer. Keegan came to within a hair's breadth of breaking that magic mark, time trialing it, just racing it solo. It's insane where that kid is.
Yeah, because those Ergon guys had help. I mean, they were all working together that day. That was Jeremiah, Christian, Albin. That whole team worked together and they were out for the record. And Keegan, later stated he wanted the record, but man, on his own, he almost broke it. Imagine if he just had any kind of help, any kind of partnership, and I think he blows right through it.
So back to my race. I mean, I would love to talk about Keegan's race all day, but the first half mile of that Columbine climb is so brutal. I really was on the threshold of walking. I didn't quite. Honestly, it was partially because of the many people who along the course that I was passing or were, I think, occasionally passing me, but mostly in the climbs on my single speed, I would be passing people. But a lot of thanks for the podcast, a lot of good job single speed, a lot of kind words. And I mean, that strikes me how often folks on the Leadville 100 course at 10,000 feet are still able to, take a moment to say something nice to who is, in the end, more or less a complete stranger. I think that speaks really well of the folks that we have in this race. It makes me proud to be one of the group.
Yeah, and the feed zones too. People would be riding by, like really they should be focused on riding, and they'd yell out "Hottie" or "Leadville Podcast," or I mean that went on all afternoon while we were there.
It's gratifying, it's kind, and it's awesome to be part of an event like this for sure. I will say that after that first brutal half mile, and you kind of come to a nice little campground area, and you take a right-hand bender around that, and it's a good opportunity to eat. And after that, the climb sort of resumes in earnest again. And someone alongside me started telling me about how he lives in a neighboring town and where he rides and how I know his brother-in-law. And I honestly, Hadi, I cannot believe that there was someone who had that much energy for talking. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to remember any of this. But I did. I remembered some of it, apparently. So, it's just amazing riders and a lot of energy there, in spite of the fact that we are at between 9 and 12,000 feet. While I was riding up, I started playing a game. And it is... I do most of my riding in a standing position, and sweat is just dripping off of my nose more or less constantly. And I have my GPS out in front of me, and I would just try to hit my screen with my sweat drips. And if you hit it enough times, my Garmin would think that I was swiping screens. And I was like, okay. And I had the GPS locked so that I wasn't going to change the language accidentally or anything. It was just changing from my 4 data screen to my 9 data screen and so forth. And I was like, how many times can I get this thing to swipe while I'm going? So you do weird things in this race, anything to distract you. Once I got to into the open above tree line, it's time to start thinking about where you're going to walk. And when you're single speeding, the question of, can I ride this, doesn't come up as often. You know what you can ride and you know what you can't. And decisions are a lot easier. So I always knew, okay, time to get off. Otherwise, I'm going to cramp. That said, I will say I love seeing how many people are riding hard stuff on Columbine. There are the places where you have to make that decision. Am I going to ride it? Am I going to walk it? And I always, when I saw someone coming up, I would look behind me, every couple seconds, because I wanted to make sure if someone was going to make the extra effort to climb this thing, to actually ride up a segment, I was going to get out of their way and make sure other people, anyone in shouting distance of me was going to get out of their way too, because it's pretty heroic to do that with, 40 something miles in your legs.
But traffic is still good up here? I mean, things are spread out enough, or no jam ups, no conga lines?
Yeah, there have been years when riding was not even a question. Now, and I can't speak to where things were 2 corrals back. But, by the time I was here, it was a mix of red, green, purple, and orange corrals. There are people from all corrals around me. I don't think there was anyone from the silver or gold corral in my vicinity. But there was space that if you wanted to ride, you could. As I turned around, as I got to the 50-mile mark and turned around, definitely the knots of people were tighter and bigger. And so I think if you are in any corral up to and through purple and orange, if you have the will to ride all of Columbine, you probably can. I think once you get past that, it is tight enough that maybe you can, but probably there's going to be enough of a knot that you can't. That would be my take from a very semi-lucid mind as I was making that ride. Now, I will say, Hadi, I really like having the turnaround be a little sooner. It is so nice once you having the turn be, I think it's like right at mile 51, 51 and a half. I'm not exactly sure. I knew it on race day, and I love not having to dodge mud puddles, and I love not having to make that 200-foot dip and then turning around and coming back up that thing. Boy.
You and Todd Wells. Todd was actually surprised because he didn't race last year, and he went up Columbine expecting to go all the way down to the original turnaround, and they turned him around early. He was like, "Hey, what's that?" He didn't even know. So he was happy too.
Yeah, that would be a nice surprise the first time that you find that out. And then the descent begins. And I had what I will say, if not the fastest descent, I'm not sure if it was my fastest, I haven't checked, but I would say the nicest descent that I've ever had. And I'm going to put that down to Shimano brakes. They really are simply the best. I've ridden with, I think, most brands that are out there, and nothing modulates like XT and XTR brakes. I actually, on my Niner, I have XTR in front, XT in the rear. Not because of one is better than the other, but just because of supply chain issues. So I think probably a lot of us were riding with stuff that we were able to put together this year. When you're descending for a solid hour, it is really nice to have the confidence that Shimano inspires. We seriously have been lucky to have them as a sponsor this season.
Shimano's worked really hard on that too, getting rid of some of that initial bite that's a little too much and offering a little more modulation, a little more linear action to that braking. And that's exactly what you're feeling there.
Yep, it is. And a little tip for I actually had very little hand numbness this on descents this year, and that is because I have been I dialed in. I brought in the reach on my brake levers a little bit. I don't know if it is normal practice when you get a bike fit, but if your hand reach and where your hands rest on the brake levers and where the bite begins is not part of it, then you need to go back and make sure that that is part of it, because that makes such a difference in how you descend and how, whether your hands go to sleep as you are making the biggest extension you can to get to the brakes. So on to the descent, Hottie. One of the great things about Leadville, and frankly, one of the scary things about it as well, is after the turnaround. And you are laser focused on not crashing, but you're also trying to pass on some of the positive energy that you picked up from folks on the way up and pass it forward on the way down. I have a lot of friends who were racing Leadville 100. It is amazing to me how many of them I did not see. And I felt terrible. I was shouting at people randomly and, woo, go, you're doing great. I did notice Lisa, and so I'm proud of that. I noticed Dave Thompson. I did not see my friend Amber, who was there. I did not see, I don't know. I'm not going to list all the people that I did not see just because I was looking straight ahead, trying not to crash into people. But I felt like I didn't hold as many people up this year as I normally do. I did see Cole toward the bottom. Cole Klober, who was on the show earlier, son of Ken Klober. He yelled at me that he had broken a wheel, so I knew a little bit of his story as I was writing down. I saw Doc Wenmark, who is well known, has been working on his 20th finish. Thought he might be on the bubble. He did not finish, by the way, which means he is going to try for his 19th again next year. He's going to get it. He just needs two more finishes, and he is there.
So descending. You did come down. You came into Twin Lakes alternate again. By the way, descending at Leadville is obviously a skill that I think many of us could stand to focus a little bit, because you and I have talked about. A lot of people have said this is not a single track course. It's not a Breck Epic type of descent, and we all get that. But Leadville does present its own descending challenges. It's a fast. There are fast descents. They are loose. It's loose over hard. It's rocky, and that requires a specific skill set, which is why you see some tentativeness coming down off Columbine, coming down off of a power line in the morning and over the other way going inbound in the afternoon, because it is, I mean, there's inherent danger there. And I think it causes some tentativeness and probably costs some folks a few minutes because maybe they're not quite prepared for what Leadville does offer. Not what it doesn't offer. We know what it doesn't offer as a descending course, but what it does offer.
It is its own kind of technical. And there are people and double track in the mix. And then you have a rocket fast graded dirt road descent for 8 miles. It is a lot. It is a lot, and it requires presence and it requires technical skill. By the time I got down off of Columbine, I was super happy to see you, Mrs. Hottie, and this time I did notice David Houston because he was handing me a Coke, which I appreciated.
And this stop was actually faster than the first one, so fast that I was surprised at, when you left, I looked down and your rain jacket was still there, and I'm like, okay, his rain jacket is still here, but you were ready to go as soon as we had your pockets emptied and freshened up and that new bottle in the slot. I was amazed that there was just no hesitation. You're like, let's get out of here. I'm like, okay, here we go. And you were, so I think the first stop outbound was a little under 50 seconds. And I know the one inbound was faster. So it was probably closer to 40 or faster.
It felt like it was no time at all. And because, like you say, it was discard the USWE pack, have you slide a bottle in, give me some gels. David gave me a swig of Coke, which was a delight. And then I was a little bit perplexed because to me, and of course, time is super distorted when you're doing this race. But to me, it felt like no seconds at all. Like I had barely even come to a stop. And I remember we had sort of an exchange where I think we were both like, is that it? Are we done? Is there anything else? I'm like, I don't think there's anything else. And you gave me a good push and off I went. So The Coke, I will come back to one last time. Man, what a luxury. A nice cold Coke. So the negative split between Twin Lake Dam and Pipeline, that is a real thing. I really noticed it this year. Part of it is because it is, of course, about half a mile, maybe 0.6 of a mile shorter than it is on the way out. The inbound is shorter than inbound shorter than outbound. But also the things that you are not doing is really evident. You are not pushing up Clavicle Hill anymore. Oh, it is so nice to not be getting off your bike one more time here. You are not riding up the single track, which as you're descending is a lot of fun. But as you're going up, you feel like, oh, it is switchback after switchback. And is this thing ever going to end? And I just want to get on, I want to get on with the business of this race. So it feels like it goes really, really fast. Got into Twin Lake Dam, again, a fast change. My twin daughters were there. It was fantastic to see them. Blake was there. I asked him because I realized at some point that, we had forgot about getting a jacket. And I said, how are we for weather? Do I need you to give me a jacket? Because I had one at that aid station as well. And he says, I think you're going to be okay. And I was like, okay, going to trust you. And I went on. And so I started up Powerline with no jacket, no arm warmers, nothing but, some spandex on me and a hope. It turned out that everything was okay. If I had been an 11-hour racer, the outcome would have been colder and wetter for sure. Boy, the headwind coming off of when you turn toward Fish Hatchery, wow, that about knocked me backwards, Hottie. But it was finally a chance for me to work with someone. A woman caught me also on a Niner Air 9 RDO, different color than mine, and she had gears. But she and I rode behind her for a second and then took a turn. And then she pulled through. I didn't have to say a single thing. I do not know if I would have finished this race without her. She came through at a crucial moment, never learned her name. Will always be grateful. Everyone has a weak moment in this race, and that was mine. I was racing on, that flat part, it just, that road feels so much longer than it is, so much harder than it is. And to be able to take turns hiding from the wind for a minute at a time, it makes all the difference in the world. Once I got past the fish hatchery, though, there's that upturn. By then, a significant group of people had accumulated between us with the woman that I was riding with, and it was time for me to go. When I'm on the single speed, I'm either walking or riding real fast when it's uphill. And so I was like, hey, it's been great. And I felt guilty. I don't know if that is weird. But you have this train, you've been working with people. I remember apologizing for abandoning them. You build up a loyalty and affinity for a group when you're riding with them like that. And you build it up pretty fast. So it was great actually riding with someone for at least a few minutes. Powerline went great for me for the first mile or two. I had some cramping on the second half of the climb, the second 2 miles of that. The pickle juice that Mrs. Hottie had put in my jersey pocket earlier in the day, it helped. It actually did calm down cramps for a minute, during which time I essentially adjusted so that anytime I hit something that was a difficult or too difficult of a climb, I would hop off my bike so that I didn't re-cramp. But it gives, like we talked about earlier this season, things like, a hot shot or pickle juice, they're not going to give you a long-term relief from a cramp, but they can give you a minute. And really that is enough so that you can get moving again, so that you can make the decision, okay, here is where my new threshold is between riding and walking.
I think they essentially divert the nervous system away from what's going on and allow things to loosen up and not cinch up on you. And that buys you a little time, right? To rethink what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't buy you a lot of time, but it can buy you a minute. And sometimes a minute makes all the difference in the world, especially if hams and quads are both locked up and your calves feel like they are going soon. A weird thing, this has never happened to me before. My cheek muscles started cramping. That has never happened to me before, maybe from smiling so much during the day. But the muscles you use when you're smiling, they started locking up on me, and it hurt so bad. That after the pickle juice, that went away. That did not come back, but that was a very, very strange feeling. So finished Powerline. It was, the podcast actually helped me out because I do a lot of research as I am prepping the script for the course as we do for every episode. And I remembered from the Powerline section of the course that it's like, okay, so it's 4 miles and the first 2 miles are harder than the second 2 miles. And each mile becomes a little bit easier as you go, just in terms of total amount climb. And the first, I think it's 1,100 feet of climbing total. Or no, 1,400. Anyway, it's 1,400 feet of climbing. You do 1,100 of it in the first 2 miles and only 400 or so in the second 2 miles. It's a lot less. And knowing that is, a good morale boost when you are really, really suffering.
It is 3 power poles, by the way. I got confirmation of that from somebody who walked it or had, walked that lower section. And they said, oh, by the way, Heidi, it is 3 power poles. You're right. I'm like, okay, good. So it's 3 power poles worth of walking if you walk from the bottom portion before you remount. So
I never doubted you for a second. I did not count the power poles.
I doubted me. So I'm glad somebody confirmed it.
That is good to know. That is something that I will check another time. I did think about that for a second while I was racing, but man, nothing sticks in my head for long during that day. So let's go to Sugarloaf and Hagerman and Turquoise Lake and Keevans. Those go by fast, all big names in the race, but it's kind of the fastest part of the course, really. By the time I got to the top of started descending Sugarloaf, I could tell, looking at my GPS and just knowing what I knew, that I was no longer a sub-9 threat. And I was not upset. On a geared bike, I know I would have been if I did not get sub 9, I would have been within seconds of it. I think I probably would have got sub 9. With an 8.9 and with a 9.19 finish on a single speed, I think that I was I was a good sub 9 threat on a geared bike. But I was not out there to get sub 9 necessarily. I was out there to do the best I could on this race. And I felt great the whole day. My food plan, 300 calories an hour using gels. It worked great. I owe the feed big time for that, actually. Not just because of their products, but expertise they've provided for the past 5 seasons. They've been with us since the beginning of the show. And I should say one more time this season, visit them at thefeed.com/Leadville. They have done wonders for me, for you, for a lot of our listeners.
Actually, Mrs. Hottie and I went out and rode Hagerman the day after the race and found that the washboard had been, was toned down as compared to years past. So yeah, not surprising it ran fast. I thought you gave great advice, by the way, during the course that I used, even though I was out on a practice ride, to ride the shoulders of that thing, and you'll gain good speed there too. So the thing rode really nice in both directions when we were out there. And we picked up a little bit of debris that people left behind. By the way, if anybody found a valve core out there, that belongs to Mrs. Hottie. I had to change a tire when I was out there. She needed a tube, and I think I left a valve core on Hagerman somewhere. So, all right, so you're off of Keevans, and we head for what we like to call the gutter.
Yeah, that went by in a blur. I don't know if there is a ton for me to recount that we haven't talked about in the gutter and the boulevard. I was happy when I got to the boulevard just because after the first couple hundred feet where, things are very loose and very sandy. You remember that from the group ride. That was that was in pretty rough shape. Once you get by that, the boulevard was fast. I rode with a couple people, but generally would ride by them because it's uphill and it's at a good grade for a single speed. You pointed out in the last episode there was no red carpet. I did not notice that. when I crested on the pavement and you were suddenly looking down at the intersection of 6th and Hagerman and what looks like, or not 6th and Hagerman, 6th and Harrison, it looks like a million people, and you feel like every single one of them is there for you. It never occurred to me, hey, something's missing. I saw the traffic light. There was someone riding with me, and he was like, "Are we getting close?" And I said, "That's it right there. You see the stoplight? That's it. That's the finish line." A woman put the medal around my around my neck, which is always great. I was smiling, perhaps too large, because that medal hit me right in the front tooth, and it hurt, but not for very long. Maybe I need to smile smaller at the finish line. Who knows? 2 of the 3 guys who are on the single speed podium, I should say, Hottie, are in their mid 50s. Matt Crowley, age 54, took second with an 8:16. Al Thresher, age 55, only 1 year younger than me, took third with an 8:21. So, guys my age are killing it on the single speed. I can't claim old man disease as for my finish time. And the fact is, I wasn't feeling hangdog anyway. I was feeling like I had an amazing day out on the course with amazing people. You and Mrs. Hottie were fantastic out there. My kids were out there taking care of me. Yeah, it was fantastic. And I got to say, not being, second guessing my day, the people around me were a lot more, were grateful that I was not, focusing on, this could have been better. If I would have ridden gears, I might have been a little faster, blah, blah, blah. The fact is, we are all out there, and of course we care about how we do and whether we finish and in what time we finish. But once it is over, just being grateful for the fact that you were part of this thing is, I think, the thing that I want to focus on next year and beyond. I understand that the 30-year buckle is pretty big, and that's just 6 years away for me. Next year, I'm going to ride with gears.
Next year's, yeah. So sounds like sounds like you haven't given up on this thing yet. There is a next year. Huh?
I'll be honest, Hadi. Lisa and I are already starting to plan it. She and I have been having conversations, and what I am thinking, what I kind of want to do is ride with gears and suspension. And we have been talking about what if she and I didn't work together just as like me trying to pace her, but what if we worked together as an actual team where we spent this upcoming year training on our rotating pace line, working together on that, on, making sure that we eat together, that we do everything in such a way that we facilitate each other's time. Could a 57-year-old man and a 55-year-old woman who are married get what will be our combined 43rd buckle together in 9 hours?
So kind of like a mixed, detached tandem, if you will.
Detached tandem. That's actually a really good way to put it. A tandem without all of the problems that come with a tandem. I have no interest in ever actually riding a tandem. The folks who do, God bless them. I do not want to be one of them. Man, what a year. I still am buzzing from it. I don't have a lot of that Leadville letdown where you're like, well, what am I doing? What do I do now? It was just a good year. Really appreciate that our podcast listeners have been a part of this journey. And, just want to say thanks to everyone who said thanks to us.
Well, like you said, we were out there quite a bit with the microphone hanging out, and I did catch Fatty as he came across the finish line. I think I even caught the metal going into your tooth, although I don't know that we're going to play that portion. But here's what Fatty sounded like right after crossing the line at 6th and Harrison.
It has been a long time since I tried that on a single speed. I don't think I'm going to try it that way again.
You mean the gearing?
I think single speed, period. From now on, it's full suspension and all the gears I can buy.
Give it a day.
Okay, I'll give it a day.
All right.
No,
because you're constantly convincing everyone to do this. When are you going to ride a single speed? So now I'll have that on you, I guess. When are you going to ride a single speed again?
it is not. I have ridden it enough. Man.
Actually, the woman who hung the metal around your neck and nearly chipped your tooth, she's riding single next year. I met her already.
Well, fantastic. Good.
How'd the day go?
Oh, boy, just a ton of good people out there. I don't even know how many people, whether crew or riders or spectators, just so many people saying, hey, good ride, way to go. Man, it's just so positive and so good out there. I gave it everything I had. Absolutely exhausted now. So, obviously not my fastest time, but I'm real proud.
Yeah. With very little training, folks, and a rough year. Trust me, I know, because the man had barely time to do the podcast, let alone train and other stuff. And here you are again for the, I've lost count, 20.
I am now a 24-time finisher.
24-time finisher. Okay, let's go get a medal. Belt buckle, I mean.
Yeah, a belt buckle and something to drink.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously, I promise I was not high, but high on Leadville. Let's just say that. I think we're ready to wrap this episode and I guess this season, Hadi. If you like this show and feel like we ought to do a season 6, do a few things for us. Let our sponsors know that you appreciate the work we do and you appreciate them sponsoring us. Let Lifetime know that you appreciate the work that we do. And finally, go to the platform you listen on, like Apple Podcasts in particular, and give us a nice rating and a review. You will find links to all the places you can find our show at leadville.fm.
And of course, finally, tell your friends. They will thank you too for finding this show for them, whether they're not in the Leadville Trail 100. There's some good stuff there for all, but especially if they're planning to do the Leadville Trail 100. Fatty, I'm meeting somebody, I think, this Friday or in the weeks to come who said they heard about the show. He's been listening to the show. He wants to do the race, and I'm going to try to help him get started in that. And one way I'll do that is say, go listen to 130 some odd episodes. You'll learn all you need to know. All right. Good luck in getting into next year's lottery. I hope that works out for you. Have fun riding the rest of the season, and we hope to see you again at the Leadville Trail 100 starting line.
How about Eldon Nelson? Another one of our single speeders coming through. He's ridden this race a lot of times.